Australians all rejoice. Albo defeats ScoMo on Aussie Vote and Snag Day.
Bong Bong hits a record high as the Marcos family returns to power in the Philippines.
President Zelensky's peace plan begins as $26 billion of US lethal military equipment arrives in Ukraine.
And funny men George Bush and Barack Obama leave audiences in stitches during speeches in Texas and California.
Live from Lost Sock Studios, the only news network you need to stay in formation. INNformation News Network with Brian Sockington and Sandy Hosier.
Plus, Joe Snake Dog Sockic brings you the sports wrap for May.
And INN's own meteorologist Jane Bunion keeps us up to date with the weather.
Australians are celebrating INNformation as voters return the Social Democratic Labour Party back to its rightful position at the helm of the country's government. Anthony Albanese, born in a lowly stable outside a Sydney Commission housing flat, defeated the unanimously hated marketing manager turned Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, as was widely reported before the election began. While many outside and inside Australia were unaware an election had been called, millions attended the traditional sausage sizzles around the country, many even staying on to vote. Christinia Solich has more.
Long lines were visible near barbecues across the nation as Australian democracy returned to its most easily understood form of white bread, ground pig fat and cheap tomato sauce. The future of our nation in the sticky hands of hungry citizens, some waiting up to 2.5 hours for a sausage in a bread, 3 years in the making.
Without the sausage, I don't know if all these people would be here.
What is today all about?
The sausages. You're here for the sausages.
It's pivotal to the Australian fabric.
And there was fun for the children too, with ABC Kids characters promoting social justice activism and progressive Marxist propaganda.
Do you mind having this weird lefty next to you?
She's alright.
As the band struck up, many even risking the COVID danger from singers and wind instruments, it was often hard to tell there was an election on at all. But over 15.5 million Australians did vote, even if many couldn't remember who they voted for by the time they got home to watch Married at First Sight, which just pipped the ABC's election ratings by about 1 million viewers. Cold sausages and stale bread was kept aside for any Liberals brave enough to join the throngs of vegetarian, gluten-free Labor enthusiasts. And Australia's digital citizens got into the spirit of the election too, viciously abusing each other at rates unseen since the backlash against freedom protesters from late last year. Christinia Solich, INN News.
Thanks, Christinia. Joining us now from a secret bunker in an undisclosed location for his own security is expert political analyst Tony Nito. Tony, thank you for your courage.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
So, how badly did Andrew Albanese beat his opponent?
Anthony, mate.
No, Brian. I'm Brian Sockington.
No, the PM, Anthony Albanese.
Right, but how many votes did his Labour Party receive in comparison to that smug marketing guy's one?
About 500,000 less votes than the Liberal National Coalition.
Which ones are they?
Morrison's one, the ScoMo guy. Prime Minister last week.
Ha ha, good one, Tony.
Nah, seriously, 67% of Australia didn't vote for Albo.
They voted for a different Labour candidate?
No, they voted for a different party. About 32% of Australians picked the winner.
How did they win then?
Well, that's how it works, Brian.
So if more votes go to the losing party, it must have been the huge swing towards Albo that secured the victory.
Nah, he got about 25,000 less votes than Bill Shorten did when he lost the unlosable election in 2019.
I see why you're in hiding, Tony, but you must admit, Anthony Albanese did win over the hearts of Australians who seem engaged with politics once again.
Nah, mate. Voter turnout was down 2% across the country compared to 2019 numbers.
But we can at least rely on the stability of our two-party democracy.
Both major parties received record low vote counts, Brian. Almost a third of the country voted for a minor or independent party.
Yes, Tony Nito there with something about minor parties or something.
Bong Bong Marcos Jr. has completed one of the most stunning comeback stories in history, delivering his family back to power in the Philippines. The son of former dictator Ferdinand Marcos, Bong Bong took to social media using the adorable moniker BBM and stormed to a record-breaking win over opposition leader Leni Robredo by more than 16 million absolutely legitimate votes. It was the biggest landslide in Philippine election history, as well-earned celebrations took place around the country, particularly for the thousands employed to rewrite the Marcos family history, as they were deposed and exiled from the Philippines in 1986. More from James Plushfoot.
As one of the most controversial leaders of the 20th century, Ferdinand Marcos Sr. served as the 10th president of the Philippines from 1965 until 1986, when he was deposed and forced into exile in Hawaii with his entire family. His extravagant and authoritarian leadership was marked by countless human rights violations, extraordinary corruption, the assassination of the leader of the opposition, 9 years of martial law, the economic collapse of the country, thousands of Filipinos killed, even more tortured, the press censored, parliament suspended, and dissidents incarcerated, all while the Marcos family amassed a gigantic fortune from stealing approximately $10 billion from the Filipino people. But as they say,
time heals everything.
Time heals everything.
Time heals everything.
And even as Filipinos continue to commemorate the People Power Revolution that ended the atrocities of Marcos Sr.'s dictatorship, his son Bong Bong is now president, surging to a resounding election win, over 16 million votes clear of former Vice President Leni Robredo and boxing world champion Manny Pacquiao. The warm embrace of the past extended to Bong Bong's incoming vice president, the obvious choice for Education Minister Sara Duterte Carpio, whose father and outgoing President Rodrigo Duterte spearheaded a new era of sophistication in the Philippines with his stirring speeches and progressive policies.
You idiots, you bullshit. You're a son of a Don't with us.
Mrs. Duterte Carpio recorded more votes than any other candidate in Philippine election history, winning by 22 million votes. The sheer delight felt by Filipinos participating in their country's nepotism was revealed by an INN poll, where a vast majority agreed the elections were both free and fair and had provided both the Marcos and Duterte families with another golden opportunity to continue improving living conditions in the country. INN did attempt to speak to anyone who voted against Marcos and Duterte, but they were unable to be located. But of course, celebrations are easier when there's no opposition in the way. And the vast majority have chosen to look forward rather than to the past, as BBM himself told some other guy to tell the Filipino people,
"Judge me not by my ancestors, but by my actions."
And it seems that is exactly what voters are doing, focusing on BBM's promises to deliver unity rather than the estimated $10 billion stolen by his family, or their $3.9 billion unpaid tax bill, or the 22 crates of cash and jewelry they took to Hawaii, or his mother Imelda's famously lavish wardrobe, including 15 mink coats, 508 gowns, 888 handbags, and approximately 3,000 pairs of shoes. James Plushfoot, INN News.
And Brian, after a resounding victory like that, one might ask if it was necessary to hold elections at all.
Yes, you're right, Sandy. That BBM sounds like a pretty good guy.
A truly inspiring second chance story. Perhaps there's some hope for the Morrison and Trump families.
No, not according to our talking points, Sandy, no.
Well, turning our attention back to the global reaction and celebrations for the election of Anthony Albanese, the 31st Prime Minister of Australia. Wow, stunning pictures there, and quite calming to finally see a return to normality.
Stay tuned after the break for sport and weather with Joe Sockic and Jane Bunion. There's always something happening near you, somewhere. And it's happening all the time. That's why INNformation News Network is there to help make sense of it all. Because now, more than ever, you need someone to do that for you. When you watch INN News, you get INNformation.
INNformation News Network. Get information at INNformationnews.com.
The unprovoked and unlegal war against Ukraine and the millions of Twitter users standing with them continues this week. Ukrainian superhero President Volodymyr Zelensky has outright rejected outrageous claims for negotiation by Russian supervillain President Vladimir Putin, instead conveying a peace plan of his own to global leaders and citizens worldwide through his Arm Ukraine campaign. The elegant plan simply requires as much money and lethal military aid as every nation on Earth can provide, for an indefinite period, while dismissing any Russian involvement at any cost. Rupert Holsworthy has more.
Wearing his trademark and extremely well-worn army green t-shirt, the Ukrainian comedian turned president refused Vladimir Putin's ultimatum for an immediate end to the war. The mind-boggling complexities of the Russian demands were obvious, the first of which was to hold Ukraine to its own 1990 declaration of sovereignty, stating the country would not join NATO and remain a neutral state. The Russians also requested recognition of Crimea as a Russian territory and recognition of the independence of the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, both of which have already declared their independence from Ukraine in 2014. But Mr. Zelensky would not yield, claiming the Russian president needed to stop
living in the informational bubble without oxygen. I think that's where he is.
A retort Ukrainian translators were confident would surely send Mr. Putin into an irreversible despair. But sharp wit and classic good looks are only part of Mr. Zelensky's plan to restore peace to the region, the 44-year-old president taking to social media to implore world leaders to continue sending billions of dollars in military aid as part of his Arm Ukraine campaign.
Ukraine needs weapon supplies. Multiple launch rocket systems, armored vehicles, tanks, air defense systems, Bug or Western equivalents, military aircraft must have. Freedom must be armed better than tyranny.
And it appears to be working. The US alone chipping in $54 billion in aid to Ukraine, more than 3 times the amount of every other member of the EU combined. Rupert Holsworthy, INN News.
We cross live now to Kyiv and INN's Ukrainian correspondent Cody Bootliner. Cody, are you safe there?
Oh, thanks, Brian. Yeah, it's pretty scary over here at times, but I did just get Angelina Jolie's autograph.
Well, we commend you for your bravery, Cody. Can you share with our audience what it's been like to be a journalist on the ground in Kyiv at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's like war, you know. It's pretty bad in some regions or something, but like here, I mean, I had to get up early for breakfast with Sean Penn, and then my interview with Ben Stiller was cancelled because President Zelensky and his wife were doing their Vogue photo shoot in the same building, so it's pretty crazy, but I got to see Bono and The Edge from U2 perform 2 nights ago, so yeah, that was pretty rad.
And have you seen the impact that foreign aid packages are having yet? We understand funding tracker DVEX has claimed around $100 billion was sent to Ukraine between February and June this year. Is it making a big difference on the ground?
Not anything I can see yet, but like $54 billion from the US has got to do something. Like, the president's only got 1 t-shirt right now, man. But yeah, the journalists here want to see those awesome Monopoly-style silver weapons from Zelensky's video rollout soon.
Well, he's certainly earned a monopoly over the hearts and minds of people around the world, Cody.
Yeah, most other countries don't get big Hollywood stars and 24-hour coverage to their wars, but to Zelensky's credit, he's out there at the Grammys and the film festivals making sure people know there's a war going on and that they need as much money as possible. And like, who cares about Russia, man? They're not even in NATO and it's cold and weird there and people have got those hats.
And finally, Cody, we keep hearing about win after win after win for the Ukrainian army, but should the US be sending even more money and military equipment, considering they've just left about $90 billion in Afghanistan?
Oh, well, yeah, they definitely will. I spoke with White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, and she was like, don't worry about it, man. The Biden family will do everything they can to win the war, even if they don't win. So yeah, like, don't worry. Joe and Hunter Biden have it covered, man.
That's very reassuring. Thanks, Cody, and please stay safe. Cody Bootliner reporting bravely from Kyiv. Well, Joe, May has certainly been a huge month in sport, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was all right.
So what happened, Joe?
Oh, yeah, we'll start with AFL news, and those West Coast Eagles are stacking up losses like Lego, losing 7 consecutive games at home, and 2 of their last 3 matches by over 100 points, cementing them down the bottom of the ladder. Of course, it's now time for the media to do their thing and call for Adam Simpson's head, despite him winning a premiership only 4 years ago. But Simpson has said he's up for the fight, although his players have sustained an average losing margin of 76 points since he said it, continuing traditional West Coast behaviour such as midweek piss-ups, nightclub appearances, and breaches of club rules and health and safety protocols. And now for the INN Sports Wrap for May. 80-1 long shot, Rich Strike wins the 148th running of the Kentucky Derby.
Rich Strike is coming up on the inside!
Of course, I didn't back him, enough to keep working here instead of flying to the Cayman Islands to chat up ladies. Justin Thomas wins the 104th PGA Championship in Oklahoma after a 3-hole playoff and 7-shot comeback, equaling John Mahaffey's historic fight back in 1978, proving there's at least one good golf tournament every 45 years. And Real Madrid win their 14th Champions League final, their 5th in the last 9 years, beating Liverpool 1-0 and boring the crap out of everyone. The best action took place pre-game, of course, as the crowd went full French Revolution mode, delaying the game by more than half an hour. And that's sport. Back to you, Hosey.
Thanks, Joe. And now to the weather with Jane Bunion. Jane, it certainly has been cold on some days, but then quite warm on others. Should we be expecting more of these sorts of changes? That's That's right, Sandy. It was soggy, humid, warm, windy and hot, depending on where you were this week, as complex low-pressure systems brought rain and thunderstorms, leaving other areas exposed to warmer northerly winds, mostly driven by conversations in Parliament House. Over 180 millimetres of rain was recorded in flood-ravaged New South Wales during the week, and we thank INN's resident Lucky the Drudge for his brave efforts out in the elements. It was a lovely and clear 29 degrees in Melbourne yesterday, perfect for spotting and reporting anti-government protesters. Tomorrow we can expect more of the same, or something completely different, depending on coal emissions and how many clouds appear in the sky. Across the country, we can expect heat in the hot areas here, and cold in the cooler areas. This cycle is expected to continue for about 6 years until all areas become engulfed in permanent flames. Around the world now, and the devastating heat wave in the UK continues, with temperatures expected to top 20 degrees. Many are expected to flock to beaches, however some Englishmen were unsure whether to swim in the sand or the water, and while water is usually cooler, sand is the safer and preferred option. Hot and dry in the country of Africa, cloudy in parts of North and South America, and grey skies for Greater Beijing as the Chinese take advantage of the 8.6 gigawatts of new coal power plants they built in the first quarter of 2022 alone. Back home now, and the 7-day forecast suggests that the sun will certainly play a role on each day, whether it's surrounded by clouds, lightning or snow. So pack a brolly and wear your togs just in case, Brian. We'll leave you tonight with funny men George Bush and Barack Obama dazzling Texan and Californian audiences with the kind of humour and honesty that comes with over 16 years of collective presidential power. Bush shared his expertise on election integrity, a subject familiar for the next-in-line son of a former president who won his first election with less votes than his opponent after overturning a recount in Florida.
We've been pulling off elections for quite a while.
And his second, despite Democrat claims that he stole it.
There are still legitimate concerns over the integrity of our election.
I agree with tens of millions of Americans who are very worried. There is no paper trail.
Malfunctioning electronic machines. This is their only opportunity to have this debate while the country is listening, and it is appropriate to do so.
Bush became known for declaring war on nouns like terrorism and drugs, but he's always loved a bit of comedy.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
And his recent media appearances have uncovered a more peaceful, artistic, and even human Republican.
Did you paint that? Oh, look at that. I can't make fun of him now.
Leading to perhaps his most honest moment of all during this recent condemnation of Russia's Vladimir Putin.
The decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, too. Anyway, 75.
Former President Barack Obama is another master of the art of public speaking.
I'm going a little off script here.
His brutal honesty turning a Stanford University lecture on misinformation into unmissable information.
And yet, despite the fact that we've now essentially clinically tested the vaccine on billions of people worldwide, around 1 in 5 Americans is still willing to put themselves at risk and put their families at risk rather than get vaccinated. People are dying because of misinformation.
So perhaps other influential figures will follow in the lead of these two brave former presidents, including Dr. Anthony Fauci.
The NIH has not funded gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute.
The National Institutes of Health acknowledged that it funded research of a virus that was enhanced in a lab.
I have never lied before the Congress.
And famous nerd Bill Gates.
The presence of social media plus a pandemic is a combination that's never been tried before. Nobody would have predicted that I and Dr. Fauci would be so prominent. Did we create the pandemic? Are we trying to profit from it?
Wow, great insight into the thoughts of the really important people in charge of things, Sandy.
Yes, you can only hope that they're aware of the profound impact they have on the rest of us.
And that brings us to the end of the news for the month of May 2022.
Remember to help produce our next episode of INN by donating some value for value at INNformationnews.com and saving us on your phone and browser's homepage.
And until next time, may our news be your views, and goodbye.
Goodbye.